Madam President, members of the Senate, I rise first to express my grave concern over President Trump's recent actions and words that have brought us to the brink of an unauthorized war with Iran. Today, I am introducing a resolution with Senator Warren and Senators Leahy and Reid and Booker and Wyden that's very simple. Because on Saturday, President Trump tweeted that his administration is targeting 52 sites, some of which are cultural sites treasured by the Iranian people. My resolution is very simple. It says that attacks on cultural sites in Iran are war crimes. It's as straightforward as that. The president would compound the mistake which he has made and turn it into something that could be catastrophic for that region, for our country, for the world. President Trump's repeated threats to add Iranian cultural sites to his military target list is a betrayal of American values. It is wrong. It is a needless escalation which ignores international law and the Defense Department's own policies. Attacking cultural sites is a violation of international law. Article 53 of Protocol 1 to the Geneva Conventions prohibits any act of hostility against cultural objects, including making cultural sites the target of reprisals. The 1954 Hague Convention for the Protection of Cultural Property in the event of armed conflict, which has been ratified by this body, also prohibits the attack or destruction of cultural sites. And attacking cultural sites would also violate the Defense Department's own policies. The Department of Defense Law of War Manual states that, quote, cultural property, the areas immediately surrounding it, and appliances in use for its protection should be safeguarded and respected. The fact that President Trump's threatened attacks of cultural sites in Iran violate international law and Department of Defense policies may be why yesterday Defense Secretary Mark Esper appeared forced to contradict the president. When asked if cultural sites would be targeted, as the president had suggested over the weekend, Secretary Esper stated that the United States follows the laws of armed conflict. Well, the United States Senate then should speak clearly with one voice to tell President Trump that it does not condone attacks on cultural sites in Iran. And given Secretary Esper's comments yesterday, I cannot see why my friends on the other side of the aisle would not support this resolution, to make that statement very clear and to make it now, before Iran potentially retaliates against us and the president begins to select the targets inside of Iran. Because attacking cultural sites is what ISIS does. It's what Al-Qaeda does. It's what the world's most heinous terrorists do. There's no excuse for the president to threaten war crimes by intentionally targeting the cultural sites of another country. This is not who we are. We're the United States of America. We are better than this. We actually fight against this. We condemn ISIS. We condemn others who destroy the culturally sacred objects in other countries. And just a few years ago, in 2017, the Trump administration itself opposed and condemned the unlawful destruction of cultural heritage at the hands of ISIS. As a top U.S. official to the United Nations, U.S. Deputy Permanent Representative to the UN, Ambassador Michelle Sisson, said on the president's behalf, quote, "The unlawful destruction or trafficking of cultural heritage is deplorable. We unequivocally oppose it, and we will take all feasible steps to halt, limit, and to discourage it. But now, the president himself is threatening to engage in exactly these sorts of illegal and reprehensible attacks on Iran. Well, the United States, it had a choice to make back in World War II, because our military kept putting Japan's ancient capital, Kyoto, back on the target list for the atomic bomb. Kyoto is home to more than 2,000 Buddhist temples, Shinto shrines, including 17 World Heritage Sites. It was Secretary of War Henry Stimson who went directly to President Truman to argue that Kyoto should be removed because, quote, the bitterness which would be caused by such a wanton act might make it impossible during the long post-war period to reconcile the Japanese to us. So if we want any ultimate reconciliation with Iran, we cannot allow Donald Trump to order the destruction of the cultural history of Iran so that reconciliation may never be possible. Imagine, just imagine the outcry the American people would have if our symbols of cultural heritage were destroyed. The Statue of Liberty, destroyed. Independence Hall, where the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were drafted, destroyed. The memorials along the National Mall, destroyed. These places house and embody our collective history and the culture of the United States of America. The assassination of General Soleimani was a massive, deliberate, and dangerous escalation of conflict with Iran. On what conditions prompt us to go to war? The United States Constitution and the War Powers Act leave little ambiguity. The Congress, and not the President, has the power to make or authorize the war. The Congress has the authority to determine when and how we go to war. We cannot and must not get drawn into a costly war with Iran. We need to de-escalate now, but President Trump's threats to illegally attack cultural sites in Iran only align us with the world's most sinister and draw us further along the path to war. Now, some might say, well, Secretary of Defense Esper says that President Trump will not do this. Well, let me read you President Trump's tweet at 5:52 p.m. on Saturday evening. Here's what he said. Targeted 52 Iranian sites, some at a very high level and important to Iran, the Iranian culture, and those targets and Iran itself will be hit very fast and very hard. That's the President of the United States, just Saturday night, 5:52 p.m. And we're supposed to be assured by Secretary of Defense Esper that we don't have to worry? Well, here's what we've learned in just the last couple of days. The generals were stunned. The generals were shocked that President Trump ordered the assassination of Soleimani. So we can't depend upon the representations of Secretary Esper. We have to make a statement ourselves, because no one in his administration controls Donald Trump. If he says that he's going to target the most valuable cultural sites inside of Iran, we should believe him. He does what he says he's going to do. He wanted to kill Soleimani, even if the generals were shocked. He does it. If he doesn't understand the long-term consequences from his perspective, just get over it. Well, we sow the wind, we're going to reap the whirlwind. in Iran. If the president decides to take the next step after Iran retaliates, and they say that they are, and these sacred cultural sites are on the list, then taking Secretary Stimson's advice from World War II, our ability to ever reconcile may be impossible. So this is the moment that we have to speak as a Senate, because we do not know how much time will elapse before Iran strikes back at us, as they have promised. We should make our statement right now to Donald Trump in the Oval Office that we do not want him, under any circumstances, to order the destruction of the most sacred cultural sites inside of Iran. It would be a war crime. It would be in violation of the Geneva Convention. It would be in violation of the Hague Convention. And it would have catastrophic consequences for our country and for the Middle East for a generation. So this is the time for us to speak before it happens, before the president fulfills his promise to destroy those sites. He is the commander-in-chief. He said he wants to do this. He just killed, assassinated the top military official, the second most powerful person in Iran, to the shock of his own generals. So do not think for a second he will not do this. This is a potential tragedy for our country. This is a potential source of eternal friction between our two countries. Reconciliation with Iran would become nearly impossible. So let's make this statement as the United States Senate. Let's follow up on what Secretary of Defense Esper represents as the position of President Trump, of the administration, that they don't want to destroy it. But let's make the statement, because we know that the Defense Secretary just may not speak for Donald Trump. No one speaks for Donald Trump. Only his tweets speak for Donald Trump. And we know what his tweets said. Very high level and important to Iran, the Iranian culture. And those targets and Iran itself will be hit very fast and very hard. We have a chance here to make a statement before this happens. Forewarned is forearmed. We've been forewarned, and our ability to act is a unanimous resolution here from the floor of the United States Senate saying to the President, as Secretary Stimson said to President Truman in 1945, do not do this, Mr. President. It will be a mistake of historic proportions and a war crime. Do not order a war crime to be conducted in the name of the American people. So the resolution, which I bring out here to the floor, is intended to have this body vote, and vote unanimously, for him not to take that action. This is our moment to speak before he compounds his original mistake in assassination of General Soleimani and turns it into a tragedy which we will have to live with for a generation. So, Madam President, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S-Con Res 32 submitted earlier today. And I further ask that the concurrent resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Madam President, reserving
Senator
the right
from
to
Oklahoma.
object. You know, I sit here and listen to this, and a lot of the American people do too. And my good friend from Massachusetts has said things here that I know he actually believes. He actually believes it. I mean, here we are with the President of the United States, who has given us, over the objections of the gentleman, my friend from Massachusetts, the best economy we've had maybe in my lifetime. You could argue that. He's been able to do this two ways. One was a way that was designed first by a Democrat, by John Kennedy, when he said the best way to increase revenue is to reduce marginal rates. He reduced marginal rates, and it worked. Unfortunately, President Kennedy died after that. Then we have the judges right now that are taking place. We have right now, I think we're just over 170 judges. And the unique thing about this, these are judges who are really constitutional judges. They've actually read the Constitution. That's a unique notion. And then the military. And again, it's hard to sit here and listen to someone who has that level. You hear so much hatred about this president. But he's getting so many great things done. If you look at the military, not many people know this. Now, I chaired the Senate Armed Services Committee. I know a little bit about it. And we know that during the Obama administration, during the last 4 years, and this would have been from 2010 to 2015, that he reduced the budget for the military by 25% using constant dollars. Now, that's never happened before. Even after World War I and World War II, when those reductions took place, this was even more than that, at a time when you could argue it's the most dangerous time in history. And so here the president has been responsible for that, and yet there's so much hatred out there. And then the issue at hand now, the subject of the gentleman's document is rather interesting, because he's talking about cultural sites. I can remember in the very beginning of the Obama administration, he went out of his way to protect cultural sites. You talk to people in different religions, minority religions in different countries, and they talk about what he's done to protect minority rights in sites, churches that have been torn down. So here's a guy who is our president, who's been right in the middle of the very thing that he's been accused of offending. And so I asked these lines, that line one noted that Secretary Esper has made it quite clear that the United States will follow the laws of the armed conflict. He will. I know him well. I've known him for many, many years. I heard him say it himself. And along these lines, I note that the Secretary Esper has made it quite clear that the United States will follow the laws of armed conflict. And I therefore appreciate the spirit of Senator Markey's resolution opposing attacks on cultural sites. I agree with that. However, since our votes carry the force of law, we need to be specific in our resolutions, and it's simply not true that attacking cultural sites is always a war crime, because there are many instances in which cultural sites have been used as staging grounds for hostilities. We all know that. I can give examples. There isn't time for that. As President Clinton noted in his message to the Senate, when he sent the Hague Cultural Property Convention over for ratification almost exactly 21 years ago, on January 6, 1999, and I'm quoting from it now, cultural property is protected from intentional attacks so long as it is not being used for military purposes or otherwise may be regarded as a military objective. Misuse may subject such property to attack. And that's a direct quote. That's from President Clinton. And to be clear, I'm not saying that we should target cultural sites. We should certainly not restrict any of our military's ability to defend itself when rogue actors appropriate cultural sites for a tactical or for a strategic reason. To use the use of a cultural site to construct IEDs, launch missiles, or give snipers carte blanche against our forces is not accounted for in this resolution. And I therefore object to this resolution on those grounds and hope that the resolution will be amended to acknowledge an exception for when cultural sites are used for staging military attacks or other improper purposes. My objection.
Objection is heard. Senator from Massachusetts.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the concurrent resolution be referred to the appropriate committee.
Without objection.
Madam President. Madam President, just in response to the senator from Oklahoma, it is deeply disheartening when on the floor of the United States Senate we cannot agree to a simple commitment that the United States of America should never engage in military actions that are war crimes by attacking cultural sites in Iran. When ISIS attacks cultural sites in the Middle East, we condemn that because we know what the impact on the cultures of those countries will be. When al-Qaeda attacked us on September 11th, 2001, which targets did they select? They selected the World Trade Center, the symbol of capitalism in the United States. They selected the Pentagon, the symbol of our defense. And but for those brave passengers on that plane in Pennsylvania, when they said, let's roll, that target could have been the Capitol building of the United States of America, where we are standing right now, the symbol of democracy. They knew what they were doing. They were striking at capitalism, at our Defense Department, and at democracy. And they knew what the impact would have been on our country. And so, we have a choice to make right now out here on the floor of the United States Senate. And that is to make a statement before we do that to the Iranians. Because we ourselves experienced it and we know what our reaction was. They will rise up in a way that will make it impossible to reconcile. We will be in eternal war in the Middle East. So my request to the members is to have this resolution come back out here on the floor. I understand the gentleman's objection, but the president could be ordering additional retaliatory strikes against the Iranians within a week if the Iranians are good for their word that they are going to hit us. And we have to ensure that if the president does act, he does so in a way that does not commit a war crime, that does not destroy these culturally significant parts of the Iranian culture that go back thousands of years. It would be something that ultimately would be catastrophic. We are better than this. We are the United States of America. President Trump has already made one mistake in assassinating General Soleimani. We should not allow him to compound that
recognized
mistake.
for a parliamentary inquiry.
Senator, does the senator yield for a
I
parliamentary?
yield to the
Senator
So I
senator.
is
just asked, are we in a
recognized.
period of morning business?
We are not.
All right, I have unanimous consent that at the conclusion of the remarks of my friend from Massachusetts that I be recognized for such time as I shall consume.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
Madam President,
Senator from Massachusetts.
I yield back.
Senator yields.